Welcome, everybody. We are here in the woodworking shop of the Donald J. Smith School of Building Technology at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario. Now, as part of the college system, Fanshawe is 50 years old this year, having been created by an Ontario education minister half a century ago named, anybody? Bill Davis. Smart crowd. Very good. Here we go. Kellogg's, Heinz, Caterpillar, and just last month, GM are just some of the companies that have cut hundreds of good jobs in this region in the past few years. It's part of a global realignment, but that is cold comfort for those now looking to replace good middle-class jobs, replacing them often with precarious contract work. How can London regain control of its economic destiny? Let's discuss that tonight with Josh Morgan, London City Councillor, Hannah Rasmussen, Director of Projection North, that's a public policy think tank based here in London, Susan Toth, employment lawyer with Polishuk, Cammon & Steele, and Glenn Pearson, co-director of the London Food Bank and a former MP for London North Centre. And how do we welcome our guests here in London, Ontario this evening? Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and in particular for the warm welcome we have felt ever since we've come to London. It's been just terrific. I'd like to get everybody's backstory, if you will, just briefly. What brought you to London, Ontario? Hannah, start us off.
I was born here, and I actually talked to my mother about this, and it turns out we've got 6 generations Londoners.
You are 6th generation London.
But I moved to Tokyo to get away from London.
But you are back.
I'm back. It's a black hole. It just sucks you back.
I'm not sure the Chamber of Commerce would want it described quite that way, but okay, that explains it. Glenn, how about you?
I came in 1974. I was born and raised in Calgary, but I came here and joined the fire department back then. I had almost a 30-year career here.
What brought you here in the first place?
I had a medical condition. I had malaria from being in Bangladesh, and so I came down here to Victoria Hospital, which had a kind of tropical disease area that I worked in, and then I ended up staying and joining the department.
That hospital is astonishing,
It's astonishing,
It
and
really
I've
is
been many times. It's amazing.
You've been many times as a patient or as an
Oh,
MP?
no, as a patient. As a patient.
Okay, Councillor, how about you?
Well, I grew up in a small town called Kamalaki, Ontario, and I came here to go to the University of Western Ontario and never left after that.
How long ago was that?
1998.
It didn't feel like that long ago for you, right?
No, not at all. But
What's kept you here?
everything. I mean, I came here for my education, got to learn about the city, all the wonderful activities. It's a center for entertainment. It's a center for sports, and it's a great place to live. Very affordable, and I now have my family here. My wife and I have 3 kids, and we plan on staying for the foreseeable future.
Great. Susan?
Love probably is the easiest. I actually went to university here. I did my law degree at Western, and the minute I left, I didn't really intend to come back, sorry. But then I met my partner, and he lived in London, and at the time I was between jobs, and so I moved here, and here I am for about 7 years now.
7 years.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, good. Now, with all of that in place, we want to share some numbers here, which paint a bit of a mixed picture as to what's going on in London, Ontario these days. So let's get our director, Sheldon Osmond, to bring these graphics up. These are the unemployment rate statistics. First of all, Canada-wide, 6.8%. Province of Ontario, 6.4%. How about the City of London? Actually a little below the provincial average, 6.3%. However, as we look at the other side of the coin, labor force participation rates don't paint quite as nice a picture. Between January 2016 and January of this year, the number of people participating in Canada's labor force stayed about the same at 66%. In the province of Ontario-wide, it dropped about 0.5% to about 65%. But London's participation rate dropped by nearly 3.5% to just over 59%. And you can compare that to Windsor, where their rate stayed on par with Ontario's as a whole. Windsor, of course, just a little further down the 401. So London's population has increased. It went up 4.5% during that same period, and yet the numbers have gone down. We got to understand this better. Councillor, what's going on?
Well, the thing with the numbers is when you have these point-in-time data, you don't usually capture the fluctuations that happen throughout the year. And there's a good number of things that can be happening that mix in with the data to make it challenging. We have one of the most dramatic retirements of baby boomers happening across the country, and how that's impacted across different regions, and particularly London. It's hard to pull out of that data. So not only is it the potential changes to the way that people participate in the labor force, but also that demographic shift that's happening with retirements. And pulling that stuff out is really difficult to do with just point-in-time data. You've really got to look at the long-term trends and pull out those demographic shifts from them to understand what's happening with the economy.
Hannah, what are you seeing or not seeing in terms of economic activity here?
I think we're seeing a lot of the hits just keep coming. Like London can't recover because every time one bad thing happens, by the time the city figures out how to deal with it, and then something else happens. So we get places closing, and then that impacts. So it's not just one plant closing, it's the suppliers that end up getting hit, and they're the families of the people that work there. So it's this ongoing struggle. And I think London's really in this transition from very traditional manufacturing and what do we do next? And we're kind of in that gap right now.
Glenn, when I was a kid growing up in Hamilton, when we thought of London, we thought rich. We thought insurance industry. We thought a lot of old wealth. Is it not that way anymore?
It's not. There's still pockets of it, but I would say that it's, I really agree with Hannah about this narrative that's been built over time as we lost the big manufacturing centers that were here. It happened very quickly, and it was very difficult, and I think as a result of all of that, London no longer has that reputation, but our biggest problem we face as Londoners is we love this place, and we think it's great, but some of us, we feel too just kind of this, we can't quite get our groove back, and it's because a lot of, I'm not sure we want the old London here. When I look at these panelists here, it's so exciting what we have. So we have to find that new future, and right now we're betwixt and between.
Susan, let me set up my question to you this way here. The Financial Accountability Officer at Queen's Park released a report last month looking at job growth in Ontario. Southwestern Ontario, in general, was one of two regions where growth was below the provincial average. The other was Northern Ontario. Why do you think growth in this region has not caught up to other parts of the province?
I'm going to echo what some of the other panelists have been saying. We're in that position where we're moving away from the manufacturing industry. Everything's becoming really automated, which means loss of jobs. And I think we're really struggling to reinvent who we're going to be in the future. And I don't know about the rest of Southwestern Ontario, but certainly in London, we're a little bit isolated. Windsor's got a little bit of the Detroit industry. Hamilton has some connections with Toronto. And Hamilton has actually done a really good job of reinventing itself from steel industry to a real cultural center. And I think London's going to have to make that shift as well.
And healthcare.
And
Hamilton's
healthcare.
biggest employer is healthcare, not
Absolutely.
steel.
And
Yeah.
London has a huge healthcare industry, so I think we're going to have to really play on that.
Do you think about if it's not going to be the kind of manufacturing center it once was? Josh, do you think about what it might be?
Yeah,
The next big thing?
Absolutely. I think we have to think about that. Not only do we have to defend and protect the types of things that we've traditionally been good at and hold on to those good jobs in whatever way we can, we need to make sure that we have a diversified and resilient economy propping up and supporting those industries that are emerging in London, and there are a number of them. We've always had a strong education sector, a strong medical sector, a strong manufacturing sector, which is one of the ones that's being hurt, but we have emerging tech sectors and other sectors that we can support and allow to grow in London to create more diversity across our economic landscape.
Hannah, of course, everybody all over the province, all over the country, took a hit during the Great Recession of 2008. So I'm guessing people are probably wondering, is this just that, or is it something else?
I think people want it to be just that we're just a little bit slower than everybody else because maybe we got hit a little bit harder. But I think I'm a little bit concerned when Josh says things like defend and protect the old ways of London being successful, because I don't think we can. Like, I think there's a lot of fear in London right now of what's going to happen next, and trying to both build what we're going to do next and protect and defend what we were doing. That's too many things. That's going to pull us in two different directions. So I think there's more to it than just what everybody else went through, but I think us trying to hold on to what we were is a big part of it.
You want to come back on that, Josh?
Yeah, well, with the London economy, it isn't just about London. We are a region, and we are a regional center. And so we have some diversity across the types of things that we've been talking about when you include the agricultural sector and the agri-food sector beyond London. And so when I say protect and defend, what I'm talking about is we're good at a good number of things. We have competitive advantages in some of these industries. We need to, as we transition, not turn our backs on those. Defend maybe is the wrong word, but what I mean is let's continue to support and celebrate our competitive advantages while we diversify our economy, while we support the burgeoning tech industry in London. And thinking about ourselves as a region is really important. I'm a city councillor in the City of London, but our economy is going to be shaped by the strength of all those rural municipalities around us. In southwestern Ontario in general, we're going to be caught within that. We need to be a strong voice and a leader in that space.
So when you talk about a regional approach, again, for people who don't live in southwestern Ontario, you are including in that list what?
Well, I'm including all of the small municipalities in our CMA area, because when we talk about data, you have to include that. That includes, St. Thomas and a number of the rural municipalities around London. But when you think about the southwestern Ontario economy, even Sarnia, Windsor, Woodstock, we are all connected with those transportation networks on the 401 superhighway. The impacts of what is happening in the United States and their trade policies will affect all of us together. So we are a linked regional economy. We all have different things that we're good at. We all have different spaces, but we will be impacted by policy, particularly North American policy, in ways that we cannot possibly tackle on our own.
Okay, you may have noted, if you've been following the news, that the Prime Minister of Canada has been overseas. He was in Germany, where he gave a significant speech in Hamburg just the other day. We want to play a little piece of that speech, and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Sheldon, let's roll the clip.
Citizens around the world and across the political spectrum are looking for guidance. They're looking for leadership. They're looking for hope. And so far, they're feeling a little let down. When companies post record profits on the backs of workers consistently refused full-time work and the job security that comes with it, people get defeated. And when governments serve special interests instead of the interests of the citizens who elected them, people lose faith. Increasing inequality has made citizens distrust their governments, distrust their employers. It turns into us versus them. And we're watching that anxiety transform into anger on an almost daily basis.
Let me follow up on that. Glenn, you heard the words anger and anxiety and mistrust. Are you seeing evidence of that in London today?
All over the place. It doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think there's lots of reaction to, as Joshua talked about, regional and global stuff that's going on. But it is my sense that people are much more dissatisfied than they have been in the past. And I think it's important to remember, too, that in places like London, we actually have a test of that coming up soon. We have a London plan, which would be a new official plan if it gets approved for the next 3 decades or so. And, we have a situation here where citizens who fought for that are angry because they want to see it implemented. And there's some others in London that are holding that process up a bit by an appeal process. And I think what you're going to see in London, this kind of fat cat city as people used to see it, it's actually not that. There's a lot of tumult, a lot of turbulence going on, of people having the kind of quality of life that they're looking for. And it'll come out in places like this London plan thing and others. So no, London's not some sleepy bedroom community that's just watching that happening elsewhere. It's happening here.
Susan, that kind of mistrust and anger, are you seeing evidence of it?
Oh, absolutely. And in my line of work, where I do a lot of employment law, what's really fascinating to me is I'm seeing often people who are working in certain companies and industries that are suddenly taken over by normally American corporations, and the culture within the company shifts dramatically. And so there are a lot of homegrown, large London corporations that are suddenly changing in response to the ongoing cuts and maximizing profits at the expense expense of the frontline workers. And I see people come to my office in despair. They've been working in the same company for 20, 30 years, being shown the door with outrageously tiny packages. And there's a sense of betrayal. And that's the most interesting part of me, in part of my line of work, is seeing how personal it is. Because of course it's personal. You've put your heart and soul into the same job, and all of a sudden they just take that away from you without any regard for all of what you've invested in that company.
Josh, it puts enormous pressure on people who are in public life like you to come up with answers for those kinds of questions. Are you able to?
Well, it will be a partnership between all three levels of government, and this is where municipalities are going to have to step up. Traditionally, municipalities have engaged in the spaces that people expect them to: garbage collection, roads, planning decisions. What we have to be is a partner at the table with our federal and provincial government partners to be talking together about what we can do collaboratively. And municipalities, particularly large municipalities like London that can play a regional leader, need to be part of those discussions so that we can lead them. Because people, when I knock on doors, people feel impacted when their neighbor loses a job. They don't understand how they're participating in the successes of the global economy, though. They feel the hurt, but they don't feel or know how the successes are. And how we talk as policymakers about to include as many people as possible in our economic successes is one of the most important things I think we can do, not just for the resiliency of our own economy, but for the inclusion and to combat the anger and the frustration that individuals rightly have when they're impacted by changes beyond their control.
Hannah, do you, I mean, you've looked at this a lot. You've done a big report on innovation and a potential future for that here. Do you think politics has any of the answers that people are looking for these days?
I think they do. I think they need to start talking more to the people that it's actually impacting. And we talked a lot in our report about autonomy enhancing and making sure that everyone is included, so economically inclusive innovation. So this idea that right now we're seeing a lot of frustration, a lot of the anxiety that Susan and Josh talked about, that very quickly can bubble into anger. And I think we're at a sort of tipping point in London where we're trying to come up with ideas, and the City Hall has done phenomenal work trying to figure out what the next steps are to try and manage some of that anxiety and give people almost some hope for the future. Because right now we're talking to a lot of people that see no hope, that this might be as good as it gets, and it might get a lot worse.
I'm going to go in the audience in just one second, but you were in politics for a while, and I want to tap into your sense of the community with this one last question. I don't have to tell or remind anybody in this room that all of the anxiety, mistrust, all of those factors south of the border led to Donald Trump's becoming president of the United States. And I wonder if you see those factors here in that kind of intensity, which could bring about a similar result in this country.
I really believe that's quite possible. I mean, I see that a lot because I get out and about a lot, but it's not so much that there's a particular target. It's this feeling of helplessness, that we don't know what we can do. There's more money going around in this world than there ever has been. But it's not coming here. It's not coming to us, right? For some reason, we've developed these inabilities to be able to get those resources back into average people that are. I think that message is a really pivotal one. You might be Donald Trump and say, but you could be somebody else here as a mayor or somebody else that's saying that. But I do think the issue of where does the money go? We know it's being made and we know there's a lot of it. But why does it no longer become democratized and get into our communities? That's the real issue. And until that happens, people are going to get angry and angry because they feel there's nothing they can do about it. So I don't think it's so much the target. It's the mood that's being created amongst people that's frustrating.
And Steve, could I just jump
Please,
in for a
yeah.
quick second? I think that it's really important to mention that one of the most vulnerable populations that are going to be impacted by the anger is racialized communities, and we're already seeing a little bit of that here, even in the city's consultations around whether or not London should be a sanctuary city. I'm seeing that anger, and in the anger, it's so easy to translate into xenophobia and into that fear of the other and into that fear of that cliche, the immigrants are taking our jobs and that kind of thing. And I really worry that the anxiety is going to turn into anger, and the anger is going to turn into bigotry.
Tomorrow night we talk about sanctuary cities, and some of this we'll follow up on a lot of that. I want to get into the audience here, and fortunately, he's wearing a bright red jacket, so I'm not going to have any trouble finding him. Jim, stand up if you would. This is Jim Wilkes. His jacket says it all. He's with Unifor Local 27. Tell us what you do.
I'm the financial secretary at Local 27. We represent about 5,700 members in London and around.
Who do what?
Well, it's pretty diversified. Probably half our members now work in the healthcare industry. And then it's all over. We represent workers at General Dynamics, 3M, some warehousing, small workplaces, car dealerships. It's all over the place.
How would you rate the level of anxiety among your members these days?
It's been fairly high. I mean, we represented the workers that lost their job at General Motors. Well, what used to be General Motors was sold to Caterpillar, the locomotive plant. And those jobs are hard to replace. I worked with a lot of the people that lost their jobs when Kellogg's closed. They weren't our local, but we gave help there when we were asked. And those jobs are hard to replace. Good jobs, really good jobs, are hard to replace. And there's work out there if you're willing to work for a lot less today.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. If you had a good job at GM back in the day, how much an hour would that pay?
$36 an hour.
Plus benefits.
For good benefits with a real vision of a retirement with pensions.
And those jobs have now been traded in for more precarious work, which would give you what?
If you're lucky, it's $18, $19 an hour, maybe. And you end up working a lot of temp agency jobs. That's what's out there for those people. And hopefully they'll stick. And there's always a promise, if you're really good, someday we'll put you on staff and you'll get a real job. And it's just a revolving door for a lot of people.
You heard during the American election campaign, Donald Trump said NAFTA was a terrible agreement that he wanted to rip up.
Yep.
He's now, ever since he had a meeting with the Prime Minister, said, well, okay, not that bad as it relates to Canada, but tweak. We still need to tweak it. What are your concerns there?
Well, we're really not that concerned about. We opposed NAFTA right from the day one. When you look back, and I was part of it, I've been around the union for a long time. Bob White fought the fight against NAFTA, against trade agreements. We said that they don't work for workers, and they haven't here. I mean, we've lost thousands and thousands. We probably have less than half the amount of people working in Canada for what used to be called the Big Three. We call them the Detroit Three now.
Yeah.
Chrysler, Ford, General Motors. Less than half as many people work there now as they did in '93.
Okay, I think the other side of the argument would oblige me to add that NAFTA has increased economic activity and created a lot of jobs in general, but maybe not in the sector that was focused in this community as much. Is that fair to say?
I don't know if it's fair to say, but I know that we felt the wrath of it. I mean, we lost a lot of good jobs, and a lot of important jobs. And when you lose, as we had a Ford plant here in just outside of London, and when you lose those jobs, you lose a lot of the feeder jobs that go in, and they were good jobs as well. And we're still wondering what's going to replace them. And so, I think we can't, we can't build an economy without a good manufacturing base. And somehow you have to have trade that's fair, that works for everyone.
I want to pick up on that last comment with our other guests. Thanks, Jim, for contributing to this. Appreciate it very much. I want to pick up on that last line, and Hannah, I'll go to you first. You can't have a strong economy without a strong manufacturing base, is what Jim Wilkes just said. Is that true?
I think that's how London was really formed. I mean, we had the banks, we had insurance companies, and we had manufacturing, and that was our strong base. So reinventing it, coming up with how is it going to look now, it's really hard to imagine it without that strong manufacturing base. But those jobs are hard to find, and people are being promised that they're coming back, and I don't see how we could possibly bring them back.
I mean, Josh, that is a fact, right? $36 an hour jobs are not, with the great benefits and the great pensions, those jobs aren't coming back, right? So
Well,
do you presumably have to find something else to replace them?
Like I said earlier in the program, the diversification of our economy is important, but the manufacturing sector is still an important part of most major municipalities' industrial development land strategy. And in London, we do have a plan to invest in service industrial land to try to bring manufacturing and other types of jobs here in that sector, because you have to have that. They are still happening. Even in London, as we were losing some jobs, we're gaining in other areas like the agri-food business, with Dr. Ucker coming to London in a very significant way, and with plans to expand.
Just for those who don't know what that is, explain.
They make frozen pizzas for pretty much everybody.
Are they good?
Yeah, they're pretty good, actually, yeah.
Pretty good, okay.
Well, and being a politician with 2 jobs, I don't have a lot of time, so frozen pizza is an important part of my diet, right? But we do have successes. And manufacturing, particularly in the food manufacturing sector, of which we have a phenomenal agricultural base in southwestern Ontario, some of the best farmland in the world. Having that manufacturing here is a way to have manufacturing as part of our economy in the same sort of ways.
Let me pick up on that agri-food angle that you just put on the table here, because we want to, you guys in this room all know this story, but just in case people in the rest of the province don't, this turned into a real thing. Shall we bring this up, please, Sheldon? I'm going to read this graphic here. This is from Brian Fernandez's Facebook page. Since Heinz decided to pull the plug on its Canadian plant in Leamington, just down the road, 740 jobs were lost. Heinz decided to make its ketchup solely in the USA. Then, French's, known for its mustard, stepped in and decided to make ketchup. They also decided to use those same Leamington tomatoes from Canadian farmers. The result? A ketchup free of preservatives, free of artificial flavors, also free of high fructose corn syrup. We bought a bottle, absolutely love it. Bye Heinz. That post was shared with more than 130,000 people. Okay, Sue, why did that connect with so many people?
I think that there's a real sense of helplessness, and that's one of the themes going on here tonight. And being able to be in a position to make a decision that you feel will directly impact jobs and job security and support an industry that you know is helping you here locally really resonated with people. And I think it's important that we start pushing corporations to be more socially responsible corporate citizens, because a lot of the decisions made, I think Glenn raised this earlier, that people are saying, where's the money? Industry doesn't seem to be suffering that much, so there is money available, but it's not trickling down anymore. So now we have companies going, we can make do with contract workers, interns that we don't even have to pay. We need to start demanding better. And so what you see is people empowering themselves through social media, demanding better, and saying, Heinz, you know what, if you want to leave, bye-bye, I'm buying French's.
And French's, Glenn, apparently went from 0% of the market to 18% market share, just on this basis here. What did that tell you?
Well, it tells me, just as Sue said, that we do believe the capacity is here doing it, but this is the kind of future we have to discover. How can we create that? A thing I wanted to say, though, is I know you're getting into poverty in a little bit with another group, but at the food bank, we had a person from one of these large companies that left, and the fellow that organized the food drives for the food bank is now, I saw him one day at the food bank, and he saw me walk in, and he was hiding behind a pillar. He didn't want to see me. And I'd known him for years. Solid union guy, really, it was really solid individual. And while we talk about jobs as though that they're these tactile things that we can get and maybe move them around like a chessboard and get our game back, it's the losing of the people that's the hard part. Many of them, I was out on the line with Electromotive with Jim and a lot of others for a long, long time when they left. And a lot of those families are now split up with the husband or the wife working in some other part of the we've lost people that taught our kids baseball or hockey. We've lost great neighbors. We've lost people that volunteer at charities, great parents, whatever it is. A community can't get by without those kind of people. Jobs are what are supposed to get us those kinds of people. And I think that there's a feeling out there amongst people that look at employment that it is all about the jobs. And it isn't. And if these companies and others would look at it, the quality kind of people that we've had in this city, which has been fantastic, people like Jim, then I think that we would be a lot better off. And we've got to start putting the emphasis again on the human and not just about jobs. And I think this whole Heinz thing is just a reminder, we're quite capable. We can do this stuff. We're innovative. We're just like everybody else. But somebody bet on us because we can come through.
Hannah, that puzzle, the way that Glenn has described it, has clearly been taken apart. Can you put the pieces back together?
It might make a different picture when we do. And that's, I think, where we're really struggling, is that we've sort of, London's seen itself in one way, and we've seen our jobs in one way, and we've seen our families in one way. And right now it seems like it's all shattering. Like I've done the commuting to Washington, to Boston for jobs because the jobs aren't here. And it was a huge struggle in our family. And trying to figure out how the new picture looks, how the family looks, how the jobs look. is really hard, and especially hard because we were such a success for so long. Like London was, my mom used to say it was where the wealthy farmers retired to, because we had a theater and you could buy a nice car and have a nice house and sell your farm and live on that. And that was what we were. And I think some of the struggle we have is that we don't know what we're going to be next. And we have this huge anxiety, and things like the catch-up, my co-author Mike calls it the catch-up diplomacy, where people they knew they weren't going to change Heinz's mind. Like buying a bottle of ketchup is not going to bring a factory job back, but it was a good middle finger to Heinz and to everyone else that's left. So I think the pieces can be put back together. People like Josh, are really working at that, but I think the picture is going to be very different.
Let's follow up on that. Josh, okay, the picture in the new puzzle is going to look different.
Yeah.
In a future economy of London that looks more diversified, can you give us a better sense about what that picture looks like?
Well, let me tell you who it includes. Is the same forces are at work when people go to boycott a ketchup company as can be mobilized for protectionist national policies. And what's behind it both is people want to do something. They want to help, and they want to be a positive force. And what we have to discuss, and in the new economy in London and the new economy in southwestern Ontario, how are we going to include the population in that? How are we going to include the talents for a force of good, not a force of, let's boycott, like was said, let's give the middle finger to a company. Those people are talented, they are here, and they want to help. And we have so many ways that we can try to include them in the economy, and we need all levels of government to come together. We have so many entrepreneurs and innovators across southwestern Ontario, and they are trying to start new things, create new ideas. And how do we include the general population in that in a supportive way? Because the great thing about this is it's democracy and citizenry being mobilized in the face of challenge. And that can be harnessed in a very positive way for good, and to try to come together to diversify our economy, to create new opportunities, to move forward together in a way that embraces the ideas and the solutions from everyone.
Okay, Susan, as again, we consider this different picture than the way it looked in the past. Is there a part of the London economy that you think doesn't get the attention it deserves, and therefore we should focus on it right now?
Yeah, I think that we have a lot of talent in the form of newcomers, and it's very hard if you're a newcomer to break into the London industry, any kind of industry. London, it tends to be a little bit cliquey. There's a lot of people who've been here for multiple generations. They all know each other. They went to kindergarten together, and they grew up together. And if you're a newcomer and you're coming to London because London offers affordable housing, a safe community, and you come here and you can't break in, especially if you're racialized, we are wasting vast talent pools of people who were really the best of the best overseas, came to Canada, were handpicked essentially by the Canadian government, come here, and we're not utilizing their skills.
Why not?
I think London's a little bit white bread, not even a little bit, I'm just going to say it. It is white bread town, and there's xenophobia, there's some bigotry, and I think, again, that fear that we're seeing, that going back to lost jobs, we need a target for why are we losing the jobs, and instead of targeting, the people in power, especially the corporate structures, we look for someone to blame, and I think it's very easy to blame the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable tends to be that newcomer, immigrant, racialized community.
You have set the table in effect for tomorrow night's broadcast, where we're going to talk about this some more. But just, I'm going to give you guys a break for the moment, because we have another segment we want to throw to right now. Before we do that, just a reminder, we are here at Fanshawe College in London, Ontario, in the woodworking shop of the Donald J. Smith School of Building Technology. Donald J. Smith, I've never heard anybody ever refer to Don Smith as Donald J. Smith, but Don Smith I know. Don Smith was a great man, and his wife Joan was a Solicitor General in the province of Ontario as well for a while. If you take a look up to the mezzanine level, I guess, of this fantastic space, you will see waving up there two people who are going to add their voices to this conversation. So take it away, Nam Kiwanuka.
Thank you, Steve. Cities undergoing economic transition often look to the tech sector for growth opportunities, and it's happening here in London. And I'm here with two homegrown entrepreneurs who see a key role for technology here. They are the co-founders of Voices.com. We've got David Ciccarelli, who is the CEO, and Stephanie Ciccarelli is the Chief Brand Officer. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
What is Voices.com?
Well, thanks. Voices.com is an online marketplace. We connect creative producers at companies like Microsoft and National Geographic and help them find a voice talent or a voice actor. You know, the people who do the narration for documentaries and commercials and so forth. So at this point, we have 200,000 voice actors from all around the world who have lent their voices onto our website and are hired for all kinds of creative productions.
That is fantastic. It's such an interesting idea. It feels like a niche idea. Where did you get the idea for Voices.com, Stephanie?
Well, David and I both come from the industry that we serve. So my background is in voice, and I'm a graduate from the Don Wright Faculty of Music at Western University here in London. I was born in London, just putting that out there. It's a wonderful place to be brought up and to grow and to learn. And David's background is actually in audio engineering, and he came to London because of this wonderful school called OIART. And I'll let him talk a bit more about that.
Sure. So OIART is the Ontario Institute of Audio Recording Technology. So it's there I learned all about audio engineering and sound design and mixing, and opened up a small recording studio here above Garlick's Restaurant, a hometown favorite. And it's actually interesting. I got my name in the newspaper on my birthday of all days. And Stephanie's mom actually cut out this newspaper article because she was, as she's mentioned, a classically trained singer. She'd sing at weddings and funerals and special events. And Stephanie came in, and we ended up hitting it off. But because of that same newspaper article, there were other small businesses in town that wanted a voiceover for a radio commercial and somebody for a phone system. And they asked if I knew any female voice talent, and being kind of a nerd, I only knew one girl in the city who was Stephanie, so I gave her a call, and we ended up doing those couple recordings, and that was the genesis of us realizing that the world of voiceover, recording the human voice to communicate, was much larger than London, Ontario, or even in Canada. Clearly there's a global industry out there, and we really kind of stumbled upon it, and it's been the same idea that we've stuck with ever since.
And how many people work for you?
There are about 100 people at Voices.com working for us, and they do all kinds of different jobs. So we have a lot of people who are involved in sales and in marketing and customer service, finance, project administration, and of course tech, which is one of the great opportunities for London, Ontario as we continue to grow.
What makes London a good city to operate your business in?
Well, I found not being from London, when starting the business initially, as Stephanie and I were trying to get our footing really early on, we were two people who jotted an idea down on a napkin at our kitchen table, and we're trying to figure it out. We actually had the good fortune of tapping into the research park at Western, which is like a technology incubator at the time, which was one of the first of its kind. And
it's interesting because most people, when you think of tech, you don't think London, you think of Waterloo.
Sure.
Grim is down there, Communitech is there.
Right.
What do people need to know about London when it comes to the tech sector?
Well, I think even more broadly across all of Ontario, the provincial government has supported the technology sectors in all these what they call regional innovation centers. So any city that's out there probably has a local small business center, but it also has a complementary regional innovation center specifically for the technology sector. Now, technology is medical sciences, agri-tech, manufacturing technology, as well as kind of what most of us think of as software, internet technologies. So there's a whole infrastructure there nowadays that certainly wasn't there when we started. And here in London, it's the Tech Alliance. And so we grew up with the Tech Alliance. In fact, our offices originally were across the hallway. And because of that close proximity, and we were able to understand the offerings that were available, specifically gaining advice, being partnered up or paired up with a business analyst who would go through a business plan and as I say, really provide that advice, but also champion us along our journey.
And we mentioned Waterloo already. Stephanie, I wanted to ask you, do you find that you compete for resources with people from Waterloo?
I think that everyone here feels like there is a shortage of wonderful tech people. So Waterloo has a wealth of them because they have programs that kind of help bring those leaders up into the world and into the workforce. But what I think people should know is that Waterloo is our friend. You know, we're not, oh, Waterloo, you know, it isn't
Boo,
like
Waterloo.
that. No, we enjoy our relationship with Waterloo. In fact, we were just there at Shopify's office for kind of a tech event about a month ago, talking about what we can all do to help make things better. So I think that it is a really good relationship. Communitech is wonderful. We have nothing against Communitech. Lovely people there. Would love to really have a closer relationship with them, in fact. But when people from London say, I'm going to go to school in Waterloo and then get hired off somewhere else, I say, no. You're going into a computer science program at Waterloo. Come home. When you come home, you will find a job waiting for you, because these people, as I mentioned, in tech, especially the higher level people in the internet kind of web development area, they are hard to find. They're not easy to hire in our city. So when people go away thinking that they're going to go find jobs elsewhere because they don't think there are any at home, then they need to be talking to the right people, because we are ready to take their resume.
And David, what role do you think businesses like yours play in a mid-sized city like London?
Well, I think we certainly aspire to be, a beacon of light, if you will. Stephanie had mentioned, for any position that we have available, we almost find that people who are from around the region understand the nuances of what make a great culture and why they would want to be in London. London offers a wonderful downtown with the market and close to Via Rail if you do need to travel, and Budweiser Gardens, a world-class, arena and facility. So I think London does have a lot to offer, but there are positions that are across really all different disciplines that we receive, not only applications but also hire great people from the various schools and universities and college, obviously here in the city. So I think we can, build a great company here in the city.
And Stephanie, looking back, do you think what would have made it easier when your business was starting to get it up and going?
That is a very good question, because we literally, this is the only thing we know. It's not like we went to business school and said, oh, this is the formula to make a great company and have great success. I think what would have made it easier is just to have more mentoring opportunities. And you don't get those when your great people leave and go elsewhere. You need to come back. Those of you who are in your 20s and 30s and you've gone to the big city and you want to come home, do that, because you have so much more to give to those who are here. You wonder why there's no one here who is leading the charge. It's because all the people who have the knowledge and the experience are not giving it back to their community. They need to come home.
Well, it's great to talk to you, because people know that London is here and doing what you're doing. How much has changed in London in the years since you started your business, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on certainly these regional innovation centers. The Ontario government, as well as the federal government, has certainly put forth anything from co-op student programs, internship programs that help, introduce graduates or recent graduates and land them well into the technology sector. So we've truthfully benefited from that a few times over the years, and always encourage other small businesses that are looking to round out their skill sets or grow in a particular area. I always encourage them to, have you thought about, raising up that next generation and help them get that first, first foot in the door, if you will, with a company. So all that infrastructure wasn't there, and it is there now. So now I think it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we are doing that kind of mentoring, walking alongside people so that they don't go away and leave, is that we're very much involved with Brescia and with Western and Fanshawe. I've been a member or part of the Larry Mini mentorship program now for 3 years. My mentee is in the audience. She's got an internship actually at our company. And
That's fantastic.
We've got 2 Fanshawe interns right now, and we love bringing them on. But the point is that unless you make yourself available, accessible, someone that a student or someone else who is kind of young and looking for their next step can reach out to, then they honestly don't know about the opportunities. So if your company is not actually tapping into the youth that we have before they've decided where they're going to put their university applications through to, then we're losing people that we don't need to be.
Well, David and Stephanie Cicisarelli, thank you so much for being here, and continued success with voices.com.
Thanks for having us.
Now, let's send it back to Steve.
Nam, thank you very much. If you're like me and you're a big hockey fan and you heard that name Cicisarelli and you're asking yourself, I wonder if David is related. Yes, he is. David is related to Dino Cicisarelli. I asked him about it before the program started, and he said, yes, we're cousins, but we're not close enough to get me free tickets to any of his games when he played. So that's nice to know. Well done, Cicisarellis. Thank you very much. And the mentee that Stephanie mentioned is sitting right over there, just over Hannah's shoulder. Sheldon, at some point in the evening, you might want to grab a shot of this woman right in the front row beside the guy with the check shirt. Anyway, that's a nice relationship. Very good. Let's reset here. We want to welcome back Hannah Rasmussen, the director of Projection North, former MP Glenn Pearson, now co-director of the London Food Bank, London City Councillor Josh Morgan, and employment lawyer Susan Toth. And Susan, I'll just start with you. A little bit of feedback on what we've heard so far. How important is that kind of business to the future of this community?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. And I think what I find really interesting is I think maybe London's not very good at promoting itself because, as Tam was mentioning, when people think technology, they think Waterloo. They don't necessarily think London. And we actually have a very important tech industry here and an entrepreneurial startup industry as well right here in London that I don't know that we really do a good job in advertising. But I think that to touch on something else that was said, I wonder if people are leaving London not because they don't know that there are jobs here, but there's nothing here to really tie them to London. And I think that's where we really start looking about what makes a city a livable city. What do we want? How do we attract people to stay and talent to stay? And I think it's a combination of better transit, improving our downtown, and London loves putting down its downtown. We love hating on it. We love hating on Richmond and Dundas.
We drove around the downtown last night. It looks perfectly fine.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great, but it's almost ingrained in our culture as Londoners to hate the downtown, and that sometimes we don't even see that it's being revitalized. Because if you go down there, there's new stores and the Covent Garden Market's there, and Budweiser, I think David mentioned as well. We've got a good downtown. Yeah, we have some work to do, but we also have Wortley Village. We have Old East Village. We have these amazing pockets of neighborhoods, and I think we just need to do a better job of embracing it instead of putting it down.
Josh, is that the future?
Yeah, it is. And when listening to David and Stephanie, you can hear them talk about the positiveness of our community. You can hear them wanting to contribute to it. Whether that's being a business leader and then serving on boards, whether it's taking on mentees, whether it's trying to share that knowledge and that excitement for our city, that is the future. And it's just, the tech sector here is phenomenal. My neighbor, he went to Toronto to start a web development business, and he moved back to London because he's my neighbor now. And I asked him, why did you come back to London? And the answer was because he wanted to start a family. And in London, you can get a home that's near a park. You can have a driveway
$1 million.
that doesn't cost $1 million, right? The affordability here. He also said something about having a hockey team that wins from time to time.
Nasty. And I was really liking you right up until now.
but now I'm in trouble.
No, good for you. You know what? The Knights have been a huge success. Well done.
Well,
fantastic.
and that's it. We have wonderful things here. It's affordable. We have a great sports team. We have wonderful entertainment venue in Budweiser Gardens. We have so many positive things going for us. And Will, my neighbor Will, is an example of someone who came from Toronto to London, who's in the tech sector, because he can still do his job here. There is that community that he can be a part of, and he can take advantage of the advantages of London.
Okay, but my job, as you'll understand, Glenn, is to be a bit of a killjoy here, which is to say that's great, and we wish them all the success in the world, but that's not necessarily an option for a 56-year-old guy who's lost his job as a manufacturer at company X, Y, and Z, right?
It's true, but I think to be a bit of a killjoy like you, I think what we just heard in this previous segment was awesome. But there's a head of a tech company in London that's well known who I was having coffee with recently, and they did exit interviews as to why people were leaving their firm and going to other places. It had nothing to do with the person who had the job. It was all about their families. And they just didn't feel the quality of life was here. It gets a bit to what Sue was talking about. So I think this stuff is really important about the work and the jobs, but the families aren't finding that. So I also write for the London Free Press a bit, and so I wrote 3 articles on mid-sized cities, and it was a report that was put out by Evergreen City Match, and they talked about there were 4 cities in Ontario they felt really might have a future as mid-sized cities, and London was one of them. And the reason is because we had the hospitals, we had all these other things that have already been mentioned, but we were not capitalizing on our quality of life. So we had the advantages that Josh talked about, cheaper houses, not as much in the way of transport. There's other things that we are not. And so I really think our city council and others need to focus on that. If we're going to continue to try to compete with Calgary and Montreal and Vancouver, Toronto, okay. Right, we can go ahead and try to do that and be part of a big-size mayor's caucus. We can do that, and we should be there. But we have these other advantages that those communities do not. But in order to enhance those and get those people to come from there to here with their skills and their talent, we have to develop a quality of life that attracts those. And I think that's important. It's not just about the job. It's about the family that surrounds it.
Okay. I am mindful of the clock here, and there's a few more things I want to get to before our time runs out. And to do that, I want to read just an excerpt from a piece that a fellow named Mike Moffat wrote for TVO.org, our website. Hannah, do you know Mike Moffat? I know he's your co-author on something.
A little bit, yes. He's taking care of the kids right now.
He's taking care of co-author and husband. Okay, here we go. In order to combat the very real feelings of alienation and a lack of control brought on by automation and globalization, policymakers at all 3 levels of government need to find ways for citizens to create and have a stake in the economic prosperity of their community. There is no magic bullet to allow this to happen. Rather, it will require a suite of policies, all with a focus on local and individual decision-making. Hannah, just give us a better sense about what that actually looks like.
It looks like a lot of different things, and it really has to be tied to the community. And I think one of the problems London's found is that it compares itself to Toronto. It compares itself to Kitchener-Waterloo, to even to Hamilton now, which, 20 years ago, we would not have thought that Hamilton was going to be somewhere we want to aspire.
I'll just say it. You thought you were better than Hamilton.
Exactly, yes. But we were looking at them and saying, how can we create that here? Whereas what we need to be doing is looking at London, going back to what we've been saying this whole time. There are some really great things about London. There are some really things that we have to work on. And we're going to have to do that locally. We're going to have to figure out what works for us. We can't have a subway system. That would make no sense for us. So we need to figure out what.
Do you need
transit.
an LRT?
I think we do, yes. I think that, one of the problems is we're talking about people come back to London to raise their kids. That's what Mike and I did. But if we want to get them younger so that they can do something like Voices.com, raising your kids is not going to attract a 20-year-old to a city. Having a cool downtown, good transit system, places that they can do things at night, that's going to attract them. So we really have to decide, what do we want London to be, and how are we going to make those decisions, and not let other people make those decisions for us.
With just a couple of minutes left, Josh, I note the province of Ontario is handing out billion-dollar LRTs hand over fist. Are you in line to get one of these?
Yeah, we have a business case submitted for a rapid transit plan, and if they want to let us know when they want to fund it, both them and the federal government, we'd be happy to get started on that.
How crucial a part of the future puzzle is that?
Moving people effectively across your city is an incredibly important part of having an effective economy. And so rapid transit, and we're still in the discussions on exactly what the final bit of it will look like, but it is so important. I live in the northwest area of the city, the area I represent, and you know what? It takes me longer to get to the highway than it does for me to get to Woodstock. So it's tough to get across the city. We need to fix that, and it's going to be an important part of the backbone of our economy.
I'm going to give the last word to you tonight, because my sense is you have been the most, can I use the word, down on things? And so I wonder if all goes according to Hoyle, 10 years from now, what kind of a city are we going to be looking at?
I think it'll be great. I think, bet on us. Whoever you are, I don't care if you're an investor, if you're a government, or whatever it is, or you're a family looking for a good place to live, bet on this community.
How come?
Because we survived losing a whole bunch of businesses all at once. And we're finding ways to come together. Our city council is bringing us together. We're working with provincial and federal governments, but also the startup, the tech sector, the things at the university. This is a fantastic place at Fanshawe. I mean, we've got all the pieces that are necessary. It's just taking us time to figure out how to do that. Hannah's report, along with Mike, helps to give us a blueprint to how to do some of those things. But bet on us. That's just who we are. We're people that have had it pretty good in the past, and right now we're struggling. So yeah, I'm a bit down on the struggle. But our food bank flourishes in this town because this is a compassionate community. It's a wonderful community. Bet on us. We are the future. That's what I would say.
You say the food bank is flourishing, but
It's not good.
that's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign, and
Right.
and I hate it. It's 3,600 families a month. I hate it. But my point is, this community is trying to find ways so that we don't have to do that. It's just taking us time, but we'll be there. Bet on it.
The gauntlet has been put down. I want to thank all of you for participating in our program tonight. Hannah Rasmussen, Director of Projection North, the former Member of Parliament Glenn Pearson, now co-director, as you heard, of the London Food Bank, London City Councillor Josh Morgan, employment lawyer Susan Toth. Great of all of you to join us. Nam Kiwanuka, I want to thank you and your guests, the Cicerellis, for being up there on the mezzanine level for us. Really appreciated your participation in the program as well.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.